To help us unpack the State of the Nation address, we are joined from our Pretoria studios by political analyst, Professor Lesiba Teffo from UNISA. Professor, very good morning to you and welcome to AM.
Good morning to you and to the listeners.
Professor, your overall reaction to the President's State of the Nation address last night?
When it comes to content, I would say a sizable chunk of it was a repeat of what we had yesterday. In terms of the way forward, it's almost a repeat of what one had in the past. But one would hope that there will be a sense of agency, added impetus when it comes to implementation and application. I think that's about what we are about at this juncture. Implementation. There is nothing new about the land. People must not forget that there was a commission and chaired by Professor Shadrach Guto on the land question 12 years ago. It recommended precisely what is being said today. Non-ownership of land by foreigners. Limitation when it comes to ownership of hectares by the indigenous South Africans. So it's almost 12 years down the line that we are revisiting that and we want to implement. But it's never too late to do the right thing. Now I'm glad that at least we are doing that.
We are going to come back to the land issue, but amid the chaos that erupted last night in Parliament, Professor, did South Africans miss a few very crucial statements from the President's speech last night?
I don't think there is anything that was missed, because at the end of the day, everything that ought to have been said was said. What happened is regrettable, but we cannot say that he was denied the right to express himself. He did express himself to the full. He went through this speech from the first line to the end. So to that extent, yes, he was given the chance, but the atmosphere, the context, the spirit, the mood, vitiated and militated against what democratic prudence, protocol, and decorum would have allowed.
Now, the energy crisis was high on the agenda last night. Was there any solution, in your view, in relation to the reliable energy supply that probably stood out for you, that the President mentioned?
Yes, you see, for me, it's always about goodwill, the political will to implement, to execute, right? You would agree that President Mbeki at one stage did own up that we didn't heed the advice. And 10 years down the line, we are now contending with the consequence of failure to begin to act at the time of confession that some things are not right and they have to be corrected. But now I think some detailed plan, there is a war chest, there is a war plan, there is a master plan. Please, let's get the right people to begin to help us to implement that master plan. It is encouraging that we are putting hands to deck and we are admitting, unfortunately, under duress, that we ought to move with speed, and with speed we should move.
Now, you touched on earlier the land and agrarian reform, as well as ownership of land, also came under the spotlight. Foreigners will no longer be able to own land in this country. Can you shed some light on this turning point?
Yes, I think I fully agree with this. You know, there is something that we, in this space of and engaged in African Renaissance discourses, there is what we call land grab, right? The foreign countries now today beginning to own a sizable chunk of African land, arable land, for their own benefit. There are countries that have already mortgaged part of their lands to China and so, right? And we are saying, in this context, in this spirit, if we continue in that sense, then neo-colonialism indeed would become colonialism in the true sense of the word, because you might end up being a shareholder or perhaps a tenant in your own country on your own land. So it is important that to put limitations. I think in Ethiopia you dare not even think along those lines. Neither are the indigenous people themselves allowed to own land. Land is owned by the state. And traditionally and historically and customarily in South Africa, the land is owned by the chief as at least a titular head on behalf of, and the state in South Africa should, as a titular head or a legal persona, own the land on behalf of the people, and the people must enjoy the use thereof, but not the foreigners, not at all.
Now, the President again touched on the fact that we have a very good story to tell. In your view, does this story relate to the state of our economy as well?
The state of our economy is not what it should be. But equally, we must concede that there are attempts to improve to the extent possible. The economic meltdown is a challenge to everybody under the sun. And we are part of that community that is faced with that. But I think, for me, is the programs that we conceive and that we should implement to ensure that at least we make a dent on the challenges that we face. And to do that, I'm saying get appropriate skills, appoint appropriate personnel, and put at the center of your appointments meritocracy. I can assure you, you'll go some distance. We have got policies. We have got resources. By the way, South Africa is a very rich country. It's unfortunately mismanaged and undermanaged, let alone being corrupted perpetually by those who are supposed to take charge and lead it to a better world, especially for the people who elected them. It is possible, it is doable, but let's get the right people to be in charge.
Now, I can't agree with you more that we have these wonderful policies, but we also spoke about the blueprint plan a little bit earlier. But is it implementable, Professor?
Yes, I tell you, to a large extent, it is implementable. Just begin with the land question and show willing seller, willing buyer. For the past 15 years, we have been talking about that. Why don't we just discard that and begin to implement, right? And I suspect we are going to implement precisely because the EFF is putting too much pressure and they have taken this one as their rallying point. And that's where the beauty of democracy for me comes into question. When you have got quality, strong, competitive and capable opposition, a ruling party oftentimes does better because it knows there is somebody equally competent who can take over from me. And I'm beginning to have a sense that the ANC will do better going forward because of the pressure emanating from the EFF and from the DA. And I wish them well, as long as they can find it within themselves to work as a collective in the interest of the nation.
Professor, was there anything important in your view that the president perhaps neglected to touch on? I mean, we also had issues of the lootings in Soweto. We also had the water crisis. Was there anything in your view that was missing?
In education lies the future of any country, and knowledge is power. All the beautiful things that you and I have spoken about and have spoken about, for as long as the fundamentals of education are not right, 20 years down the line, you and I will still be talking about this. I think we must acknowledge that we must go back to basics when it comes to education. And I talk about in the broad sense of the word, across the spectrum, from elementary education to technical and vocational institutions. Let's get appropriate people, committed professional people, begin to prepare to skill and educate our children. I can assure you, 10 years down the line, we'll begin to reap the dividends. The second point that was almost not on the radar is corruption. Say all these beautiful things, come with all these plans, but as long as the current culture is endemic as it is, and service is about the self and not the public, I say again, you and I will be here 20 years down the line, still discussing the same thing. And then the question would be, where did we go wrong? 20 years down the line, what happened yesterday behoves us to ask the question, a serious introspection, where did we go wrong? And how do we move forward over this?
Professor, thank you so much for your time.
Kyalewo.